I want to thank you for this invitation to be able to address this workshop. And I want to begin, without prejudice to the very astute comments made from the head table thus far, by recognizing the important point made by Ambassador McCook that we have been able to make some progress. And this is something about which I think we can be justifiably pleased and proud. I chose to do this from a standing position because I want to register as well some formal concerns. And I feel as Minister of Foreign Trade in Barbados, it is deeply important that we don't skim over the surface and unintentionally descend into superficially treating to some of the legitimate concerns. As you know, I would have been in Abu Dhabi a month ago, and I was taken aback, I confess, by some of the misconception and some of the misappreciation and frankly misapprehension of several delegations there. And this is something about which we have to be, I think, vigilant and mindful, because we've been having this discussion for over 20 years. And though we've been able to make progress, there are still some state-specific concerns that seem not to be addressed. In fact, colleagues in CARICOM who were present will recall that we were invited by one delegation, the name of which I will not go into now, nor descend into the particulars of the problem, but led by a deputy prime minister of that Pacific state, no less. And their concern was of adequacy of consultation. In any circumstance, that must be a legitimate concern, but it took me by surprise that that is being raised after all of this time. Equally, a large misunderstanding about the fish fund and the purpose of the fish fund. And that too is something of significance. Now, while there's a variable geometry in the level of understanding across the world, I think we in CARICOM have to be very sure-footed. And I'll come back to that a little later on. But what I want to say is, and I deliberated on this, and I thought it best not to, as I said, make the mistake of being in any way superficial on some of these issues, but to be as detailed as possible in some of the things I wish to say. In Abu Dhabi, we were doing our utmost to complete the negotiations on a number of texts, including that related to, obviously, overcapacity and overfishing in the area of fisheries subsidies. And we know that those efforts were not successful, but they were not successful due to a lack of political will. I think that the most important takeaway is that the mandate to complete the negotiations has not expired. And I reinforce that the mandate to complete the negotiations has not expired. And therefore, member countries must, in my judgment, redouble their efforts and also to try to strive towards finishing phase 2. The challenge which remains is for members not to roll back on what has been agreed already in principle. Despite our fears, in my judgment, and that is part of the misapprehension, Director, there are were many delegations who maintained a posture that this process may not be as democratic as it should be, or it is not working as it should be. And I think that what we can say by way of takeaway is that every member country, regardless of size, had a say. And all obviously is not agreed until everything is ultimately agreed. So that in principle, multilateralism, the ambition, is working and was demonstrated to be working. But the process also showed that all stakeholders, and not just trade officials, are required to engage successfully at the national, regional, and multilateral level for there to be outcomes which redound to the benefit of all. I am pleased, therefore, to see the speakers in this opening session and the cross-section of participation in this workshop. Today, obviously, is not the time and place for me to give you a lecture gratuitously about the importance of the fishing sector or its value to regional food security or national economic security, employment, environmental goals. I think we all know all of these things. The issue here is more about the quest of achieving sustainable and viable fisheries resources and management thereof. Now, in this regard, the WTO's rule is clear. It operates a global system of trade rules. It acts as a forum for negotiating trade agreements. It settles trade disputes between its members and supports the needs of developing countries. We all have a role in this process by ensuring that there is accurate information available in the public domain relating to all agreements under the WTO's purview, which can assist that body in refining and in negotiating positions and decision-making. I want to urge, first of all, that there must also be continued transparency in the process, and that all members must continue to be given the opportunity to air their views. This is a very valuable proposition, especially for small states like ours. Our partners in this region, the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, the Caribbean Development Bank, the CARICOM Single Market and Trade Directorate are also exceptionally critical, and your inputs weigh heavily on decisions that we are making. I want to say, and I acknowledge the Barbadian delegation and our Chief Fisheries Officer, and say that this was not an easy lift even in the cabinet of Barbados. And that is why I don't want to make the mistake of treating this as something where we can descend into superficiality. This required robust debate in cabinet because there is a give and take required and a balancing of competing perspectives. And I want to say that at this point, I take the opportunity to thank the CRFM in particular and the Single Market and Trade Directorate for the extremely valuable support provided, not only in Abu Dhabi, but in the process of getting us to Abu Dhabi and equipping us to be able to get to that point. To the CRFM, I say to you that the region is depending on you as you roll out the 2022 to 2030 strategic plan, which seeks to operationalize and implement both the vision and the mission of organization and the long-term policy commitments of member states, as articulated in instruments such as the Castries Declaration on Combating Illegal, Unreported and Unregulated Fishing. We know as well that the CARICOM Single Market and Trade Directorate will continue to provide the technical and policy guidance as we continue to engage in phase 2 of the fisheries negotiations. And collectively, we also have an obligation to bring these issues to the relevant councils in CARICOM in order to address the issues that plague the fisheries sector. And with regard to the CDB in particular, you are the homegrown financier of the region, and I want to strongly encourage that adequate resources continue to be allocated to assist all states in the implementation of the Fisheries Subsidies Agreement as you roll out your own strategic plan and the substance of the 2022 Memorandum of Understanding, which was signed by the World Trade Organization. As you are aware, and we just said it, Barbados is one of the few countries which has accepted and ratified the Subsidies Agreement. And I believe that notwithstanding the countries already listed, there are at least 2 others which are in the queue awaiting the opportunity to deposit instruments at very short notice, perhaps within the next couple of months, as I understand it. In Barbados, we did so, as I indicated, only after extensive consultation with the ministry responsible for the sector, and as well with the fisheries umbrella organizations in Barbados, and with generally wider fisher folk. In some cases, I led those discussions and consultations personally. And for those of you who have not signed, you may now be tempted to ask, well, why did Barbados sign? We are an island of only 166 square miles. In our particular case, our maritime waters are estimated to represent 4 to 5 times the total land area of Barbados. In a real sense, therefore, we're not just a small island developing state, but we are a large ocean state. And as such, we have to take every action available to us in order to preserve, protect, and ensure the sustainability of the ocean around us. Did I just say 4 to 5, or did I say 425? I think it's 4. Yes, 425. And that is a substantially more vast space in terms of maritime capacity than what we have terrestrially. The fishery sector in this region faces 2 main challenges. The first is the sustainable development of, and the second, the management of our fisheries and aquatic resources. And to meet this twin challenge in Barbados during this upcoming financial year, starting on the 1st of April 2024, the government has more than doubled the allocation to activities focusing on fisheries management and the development of fisheries services and market development over the sum that was allocated in the last financial year. In addition to that, the Ministry of Environment, National Beautification, Green and Blue Economy will advance marine conservation efforts, including marine infrastructure work, marine spatial planning, and coastal protection. We also anticipate the rollout of the Fisheries Management Plan, which also includes a focus on food security issues of aquaculture and mariculture, as well as sustainable management for the benefit of all stakeholders in the sector. Therefore, in short, as a country, we are committing ourselves to the right policy mix to achieve our fisheries management goals, and we pledge to continue to work collectively with all stakeholders to implement these policies and actions. Now, we began this morning by asking prayerfully for the leadership of the region and urging upon us all courage, and if I remember correctly, boldness, and if memory serves me correctly, unity, perseverance of leaders. And I want to now urge that also upon all of you participants and delegates in this meeting. I want to take the opportunity to urge that you do not keep silent. What I witnessed at the level of a deputy prime minister, no less, of one of the Pacific states disturbed me because it suggested to me that that particular state waited too late to raise its voice. And processes do exist in the WTO that you should be heard before having come to that very delicate decision-making point. So it is wise, I think, for you not to keep silent. Secondly, I want to urge you to ask the challenging questions of the persons with whom you will be interacting over the next 2 days. It is only by understanding those answers to the challenging and perplexing questions and pushing the envelope that you become satisfied that this is the right thing to do. The question of adequacy of consultation ought not still, after 22 years, to be at the forefront of anybody's mind. Third, I wish to urge that you seek clarification and that you seek to diffuse any misconceptions and any uncertainties which you may have on the IUU text and the text on overfishing and overcapacity which is being developed. It is very important that we all be sure-footed and that we're all able to sing from a common hymn sheet on this matter. It is disturbing that even within CARICOM, the perspective, for example, of a Jamaica may differ from the perspective of a Barbados. And we have to try to find a unanimity of purpose on this matter. I want to also urge you to help me and to help my colleagues at ministerial level to ensure that the Fish Fund, which has been launched to assist in the implementation of the agreement, is accessible to the region, and that technical issues don't arise, and that we are not restricted by criteria such as gross domestic product or any of those other barriers, I will just call them barriers, which are created from time to time, but which tend to plague us and plague our effort at progress under a host of other agreements. It is in our interests that we speak with a common voice on that as well. I want to urge you to make sure that you are clear on the flexibilities which developing member countries have, because it is only with an understanding of those flexibilities that you will feel confident that you are able to be sure-footed, as I asked you to be before. And last, but by no means least, to maintain the conversation with your colleagues when you return home and keep in contact with your representatives in Geneva or Brussels or London or wheresoever in order to keep abreast of ongoing negotiations. Colleagues, we are all now at the intersection of fisheries, trade, development, and regional economic buoyancy. This is where the rubber has met the road. And as has been indicated at the head table before, fishing is a way of life. It is ingrained in the DNA of our region. And we have to do the best to ensure the sustainability and viability of this sector. And for us in the Caribbean in particular, and quite frankly, as it was for our friends in the Pacific, or as it still is, failure really is not an option. And it's for those reasons, therefore, that I urge you to make the most of this technical workshop on ratification and implementation, and to do all the things that I've previously urged you to do. And Godspeed in your endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Honourable Minister Symmonds. And again, thank you for urging us to remain engaged in the negotiations and raise your concerns in timely manners, and also clarify any doubts or misunderstandings that you will have regarding the first IUU agreement text and the draft text on overcapacity and overfishing. And also reminding us of the importance of having a common goal as CARICOM in the negotiations going forward. So in closing, let me express my gratitude to the speakers for their remarks and reminding us about the global importance of fisheries and the agreement on fisheries subsidies. And I also express sincere appreciation to the in-person participants as well as the online participants for their attendance. And as you would have heard, the fishery sector is critical in supporting fisher folks' livelihoods, food security, blue economic transformation, trade, and the overall social and economic development of our member states. And its importance cannot be overstated. The commitment of the Caribbean Development Bank, the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, the World Trade Organization Secretariat, and the CARICOM Secretariat in providing resources for this workshop reflects their commitment to supporting regional sustainable development and economic growth in the fishery sector. And I look forward to delegates sharing their experiences with respect to the internal processes and approach towards ratification of the agreement, and also identifying areas for technical assistance and capacity building. I wish you a productive workshop, and I now declare the workshop open. Thank you very much.